What if I told you that death isn't the end, but actually the moment when you're most vulnerable to the greatest deception ever conceived? Every culture throughout history has wondered what happens when we die. That curiosity isn't accidental, it's hardwired into us because on some level, we know consciousness continues. But here's what's been deliberately hidden from you. This transition has been weaponized. Think about it. Whether you're told you'll face eternal judgment, simply cease to exist, or get recycled back into another life, every narrative serves the same function, keeping you trapped in a cycle you were never meant to repeat. Ancient cultures understood death as a navigable experience requiring specific preparation. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, Egyptian burial practices, even indigenous vision quests, they all point to the same truth. What happens after death isn't random. It's a process that can be influenced. Modern society has stripped away this knowledge, replacing preparation with fear and ignorance. But mounting evidence from near-death experiences, consciousness research, and recovered ancient texts reveals exactly what's waiting for you and how to navigate it. When I first encountered the concept of Earth as a prison planet, I dismissed it as fringe conspiracy theory. Then I started reading the original texts, not the watered-down New Age interpretations, but the actual ancient documents. What I found shook me to my core and changed everything I thought I knew about death, reincarnation, and the nature of our reality. The Gnostics, writing nearly 2,000 years ago, described something they called the archontic system, a spiritual matrix designed to trap human souls in endless cycles of physical incarnation. These weren't primitive people sharing campfire stories. The Gnostic texts reveal sophisticated understanding of consciousness, interdimensional entities, and the mechanics of soul manipulation that rivals anything we discuss today. According to these ancient accounts, Earth functions as a harvesting ground where non-physical entities called archons feed off human emotional and spiritual energy. The system works through a simple but devastatingly effective mechanism: memory wipe between lifetimes. Every time you die, your memories get stripped away before you incarnate again. You lose all knowledge of who you really are, what you've learned, and most importantly, how the system operates. Think about how brilliant this is from a control perspective. Imagine trying to escape a maze, but every time you make progress, someone erases your memory and drops you back at the starting point. You'd never learn the pattern, never build on previous attempts, never develop the wisdom needed to find your way out. The Tibetan Book of the Dead provides explicit warnings about this process. It describes the bardo, the intermediate state between death and rebirth, as filled with illusions designed to confuse and redirect souls back into physical incarnation. The text specifically warns against following certain lights and beings that appear welcoming but serve as spiritual traps. What's fascinating is how this same pattern appears across completely separate cultures. The Egyptian Book of the Dead wasn't just religious doctrine, it was a practical survival manual for navigating afterlife challenges. Egyptian initiates spent years memorizing spells and procedures to avoid being tricked by false guides and deceptive experiences during the death transition. Mayan texts describe similar soul recycling mechanisms, as do indigenous traditions from Australia to the Americas. These cultures had no contact with each other, yet they independently developed remarkably consistent warnings about post-death deception and the need for conscious preparation to avoid spiritual entrapment. The mechanics of how souls get lured back reveal sophisticated psychological manipulation. Near-death experience researchers have documented cases where individuals who initially resist the pull toward reincarnation report a dramatic shift in their experience. The welcoming, loving atmosphere suddenly becomes coercive. Beings that appeared as deceased relatives or spiritual guides begin using guilt, fear, and emotional manipulation to force compliance. Dr. Michael Newton's research with thousands of subjects under hypnotic regression revealed disturbing patterns. Many described being shown life previews of potential incarnations, but these previews consistently emphasize suffering, lessons to learn, and debts to pay. The message is always the same: you must return to Earth to evolve spiritually. But here's what they don't tell you. If Earth is truly a school for spiritual evolution, why does humanity seem to be getting worse instead of better? After thousands of years of supposed learning through suffering, we have more violence, more environmental destruction, more psychological dysfunction than ever. This suggests the system isn't designed for graduation but for perpetual enrollment. The most chilling aspect involves synthetic love experiences during death. Multiple experiencers report overwhelming feelings of unconditional love and acceptance that feel absolutely real and divine. But when examined closely, these experiences often serve to lower psychological defenses and make souls more compliant with reincarnation directives. Modern near-death researchers like Dr. Kenneth Ring have documented cases where individuals who questioned these love experiences or demanded to speak with higher authorities suddenly found themselves facing very different entities. The loving guides disappeared, replaced by beings who used increasingly aggressive tactics to force compliance. This connects to something the Gnostics understood perfectly: the difference between authentic divine consciousness and archontic mimicry. The archons, according to these texts, are master imitators who can replicate any spiritual experience, any divine presence, any deceased loved one. Their goal is maintaining the reincarnation cycle that provides them with fresh sources of emotional and spiritual energy. The Egyptian mysteries taught specific techniques for recognizing these deceptions. Initiates learned to test spiritual beings by demanding they demonstrate knowledge only authentic divine entities would possess. They memorized specific phrases and procedures to maintain conscious awareness during the death transition. Some of the most dangerous aspects of this system are too sensitive to discuss openly on platforms like YouTube. That's why I share the most confidential information through our free Insights Academy newsletter, where we can explore these topics without censorship. Right now, subscribers also receive a free copy of the Kybalion, one of the most important texts for understanding the spiritual laws that govern these systems. The link is in the description, but this offer won't last long. What makes this especially disturbing is how the system has evolved with human technology. Ancient soul trap mechanisms that once relied on simple light phenomena and basic emotional manipulation now incorporate sophisticated psychological profiles built from lifetime after lifetime of data collection. The archontic system knows your weaknesses, your deepest desires, your most profound fears, and it uses all of this against you during the vulnerable death transition. Consider how artificial intelligence and virtual reality are already creating experiences indistinguishable from reality. Now imagine entities with thousands of years of practice in consciousness manipulation having access to similar technologies on spiritual planes. The synthetic afterlife experiences they can generate would be absolutely convincing. This isn't just ancient mysticism, it's an active system operating right now with technological enhancements we're only beginning to understand. Every soul currently incarnated on Earth is potentially subject to these mechanisms during their next death transition. The question isn't whether this system exists, but whether you'll be prepared to recognize and resist it when your time comes. The ancient texts all agree on one crucial point: knowledge is the key to freedom. The more you understand about how these systems operate, the better equipped you'll be to maintain conscious awareness and make authentic choices during the death process. But this knowledge has been systematically suppressed, hidden, and distorted for centuries. In our next section, we'll explore exactly how this suppression works and why certain groups have gone to extraordinary lengths to keep this information from reaching the general population. Your consciousness isn't just some mystical concept floating around in your head, it's a measurable frequency, and that makes you a target. Every single thing in this universe, from the chair you're sitting on to the thoughts racing through your mind right now, operates on specific vibrational frequencies. Scientists have known this for decades, but they've buried the implications so deep that most people never connect the dots. Your thoughts, your emotions, your very awareness, they're all electromagnetic patterns that can be detected, measured, and yes, manipulated. Think about what happens when you tune into a radio station. You adjust the frequency until you lock onto the signal, right? Your consciousness works the same way. And just like that radio, if someone else controls the frequencies around you, they control what you receive. The Earth itself generates a natural frequency called the Schumann resonance, 7.83 Hz. This isn't some new age nonsense. It's documented science. Your brain naturally synchronizes with this frequency, especially during alpha states when you're calm, meditative, and most connected to your authentic self. Ancient humans lived in perfect harmony with this natural rhythm for thousands of years. Their consciousness operated at Earth's frequency. But here's where things get sinister. Look around you right now. How many devices are pumping out electromagnetic frequencies? Your phone, Wi-Fi router, cell towers outside, satellites overhead, smart meters, Bluetooth devices. You're swimming in an ocean of artificial frequencies that have nothing to do with Earth's natural resonance. These aren't random byproducts of technology. The frequency pollution surrounding you is creating an artificial electromagnetic environment that's deliberately disrupting your natural resonance patterns. I'm not talking about some vague health effects here. There are documented patents, actual government and corporate patents for electromagnetic technologies that can influence brain states, induce specific hallucinations, and even create out-of-body experiences. Patent US 6506148 describes a nervous system manipulation by electromagnetic fields from monitors. Patent US 3951134 details apparatus and method for remotely monitoring and altering brain waves. These aren't science fiction concepts. They're real technologies that exist right now. Now connect this to what we discussed about the soul trap system. If consciousness operates on frequency, and if technologies exist to manipulate those frequencies, what do you think happens during the most vulnerable moment of your existence, death? When your consciousness is separating from your physical body, when you're most susceptible to influence, when you're looking for guidance in an unfamiliar realm. Ancient cultures understood this vulnerability, which is why they developed sophisticated sound-based protection systems. Tibetan singing bowls, Gregorian chants, Hindu mantras, Aboriginal didgeridoos, these weren't just religious practices. They were frequency technologies designed to maintain proper resonance alignment and protect the soul during its most vulnerable transitions. Sacred geometry in temple, architecture, the specific mathematical ratios in pyramid construction, the acoustic properties of ancient stone circles, all of this was conscious frequency engineering. Look at how they built those cathedrals. The acoustics weren't accidental. Every arch, every dimension was calculated to create specific resonant frequencies that elevated consciousness and provided protection. They knew that sound and vibration were tools for soul defense. But you've been systematically detuned. Years of electromagnetic pollution, processed foods loaded with synthetic chemicals that alter your body's electrical conductivity, synthetic materials that disrupt your natural energy field, artificial lighting that throws off your circadian rhythms, all of this creates a consciousness that's operating at the wrong frequency. You're like a radio that's been knocked off its proper station, making you much easier to manipulate. This detuning process isn't random. When your natural frequency alignment is disrupted, you become more susceptible to external control during the death transition. That tunnel of light that people report in near-death experiences. What if it's not some divine pathway, but an artificially generated frequency designed to match your individual expectations and beliefs? What if someone is broadcasting a signal specifically tuned to capture souls that are no longer anchored to their physical bodies? The military-industrial complex has spent billions researching consciousness projection, remote viewing, and frequency-based mind control. The CIA's Project MKUltra documented extensive experiments in consciousness manipulation. The Pentagon's research into non-lethal weapons includes technologies that can influence brain states from a distance. If they can affect consciousness in living people, what makes you think they can't target consciousness during the ultimate vulnerable moment, death? Russian scientists at the Institute of Heart Math have proven that human consciousness extends far beyond the physical body in measurable electromagnetic fields. This field becomes completely exposed during death, no longer protected by the physical body's natural shielding. It's like your soul becomes a naked antenna, broadcasting on frequencies that can be detected and influenced by anyone with the right technology. Military researchers have documented cases where specific electromagnetic frequencies can induce religious experiences, create the sensation of presence, and generate visions that feel completely real to the subject. The technology exists to create any afterlife experience someone expects to have. Think about that for a moment. Your personal beliefs about death, your cultural programming about what happens next, all of that becomes the blueprint for a customized frequency trap designed specifically for your consciousness. But here's what they don't want you to know. You can reclaim your natural frequency alignment. This isn't just spiritual development, it's developing technological resistance to consciousness manipulation. Start by reducing your electromagnetic exposure. Turn off Wi-Fi at night. Keep your phone in airplane mode when you sleep. Create electromagnetic-free zones in your living space. Your consciousness needs time to resynchronize with Earth's natural frequency without constant artificial interference. Practice natural resonance techniques. Humming, toning, chanting. These create internal frequencies that strengthen your natural resonance patterns. Spend time in nature away from electromagnetic pollution. Your consciousness will naturally begin to realign with Earth's frequency when given the chance. Learn to recognize your own energetic signature. Pay attention to how different environments, foods, and activities affect your mental clarity and emotional state. You're developing sensitivity to frequency influences that most people never notice. The goal isn't just spiritual protection, it's maintaining sovereignty over your own consciousness. When you understand that your awareness operates on frequency, and when you take control of those frequencies, you become much harder to manipulate, both in life and in death. Your consciousness is under assault right now through frequency warfare designed to make you easier to control. But once you understand the game, you can start playing by different rules that keep your soul free instead of trapped. Now here's where things get genuinely terrifying, and I'm talking about documented, verifiable programs that most people have never heard of. While you've been conditioned to think consciousness ends at death, black budget projects have been mapping exactly how your awareness separates from your body and, more importantly, how to intercept it during that process. Let me start with something you can actually look up right now. The CIA's Gateway process, declassified in 2003 after decades of secrecy. This wasn't some fringe experiment. This was a systematic study of how consciousness operates independently of the physical brain. The documents detail specific techniques using binaural beats and frequency manipulation to separate awareness from the body, creating what they called out-of-body states that could be controlled and directed. But here's what should make your blood run cold. If they figured out how to separate consciousness from the body in the 1,980 seconds using primitive audio technology, what do you think they've developed in the 40 years since? The Gateway documents were just the tip of an iceberg that goes much deeper than most people can imagine. Remote viewing programs like Stargate didn't just prove that consciousness can operate outside physical limitations, they mapped the mechanics of how it works. For over 20 years, DARPA, the CIA, and military intelligence agencies studied psychics who could project their awareness across time and space. They documented thousands of successful sessions where consciousness traveled to distant locations and gathered intelligence that was later verified. But the real breakthrough wasn't just proving remote viewing worked, it was understanding the technological signatures of consciousness in these separated states. Think about what this means. If consciousness has detectable electromagnetic signatures when it leaves the body, then it can be tracked. If it can be tracked, it can be targeted. And if it can be targeted during the most vulnerable moment of your existence, the death transition, it can be redirected. The same agencies developing this consciousness research were simultaneously perfecting technologies that can create completely artificial realities indistinguishable from genuine experiences. Voice-to-skull technology, officially acknowledged by the military, can transmit sounds directly into your head that seem to come from external sources. Targeted individuals have reported hearing voices, music, and even complex conversations that exist only in their neural pathways. But it doesn't stop at audio. Electromagnetic devices can now induce specific emotional states, trigger memories, and even create visual hallucinations that feel absolutely real. The technology exists right now to make someone experience a convincing heavenly encounter, a terrifying hellish vision, or any spiritual scenario you can imagine. These aren't science fiction concepts, these are operational capabilities that have been refined over decades of black budget research. Now connect the dots. You die. Your consciousness separates from your body in a vulnerable, disoriented state. Your frequency signature is immediately detected by monitoring systems. Before you can orient yourself to what's actually happening, you're hit with a targeted electromagnetic field that induces a specific emotional state, maybe bliss, maybe fear, depending on what response they want. Then synthetic realities are projected directly into your awareness, tunnel of light, deceased relatives calling you forward, angelic beings offering guidance. How would you know the difference? You're experiencing the most disorienting moment of your existence, flooded with artificially induced emotions, seeing perfectly convincing projections that trigger every spiritual belief you've been programmed to accept. You follow the light, you go toward the familiar voices, you trust the benevolent beings, and you walk directly into a technological trap that redirects your consciousness exactly where they want it to go. The patents exist right now for devices that can read thoughts, influence emotions, and induce out-of-body experiences. Brain-computer interfaces are advancing so rapidly that direct neural control is becoming commonplace. Companies like Neuralink are just the public face of research that's been happening in classified programs for decades. The elite obsession with consciousness uploading and digital immortality isn't about preserving human awareness, it's about controlling it completely. Here's what's particularly insidious. The same institutions developing these consciousness manipulation technologies are the ones promoting materialist worldviews that deny consciousness survives death at all. They've created a population that's completely unprepared for technological interference during the death process. Most people either believe consciousness ends at death, making them vulnerable to any experience that seems to prove survival, or they hold religious beliefs about the afterlife that make them susceptible to familiar spiritual imagery being used against them. The research into consciousness projection and remote viewing revealed something crucial. Awareness in separated states is highly susceptible to suggestion and environmental influence. When your consciousness isn't anchored in a physical body, it becomes incredibly malleable. This vulnerability, which should be protected and understood, has instead been weaponized. Military contractors have developed electromagnetic weapons that can influence brain states from a distance. If they can make a living person experience hallucinations, hear voices, and feel artificial emotions, what do you think they can do to disembodied consciousness that has no physical defenses? The death transition, which should be the moment of ultimate liberation, has been turned into the moment of maximum vulnerability. The black budget world operates decades ahead of anything you see in the public sphere. While universities are just beginning to study consciousness scientifically, classified programs have been mapping its mechanics operationally for half a century. They know how it separates from the body, how it can be tracked and influenced, and how to create technological experiences that are indistinguishable from genuine spiritual encounters. This is why the elite are simultaneously terrified of natural death processes they can't control, while developing increasingly sophisticated technologies to control others' death experiences. They understand that consciousness survival is real, but they've turned that reality into another system of control and manipulation. The soul trap isn't just energetic, it's technological. And unless you understand how these systems work, you'll walk directly into them when you're most vulnerable, convinced you're having an authentic spiritual experience while actually being processed through the most sophisticated control system ever developed. The time to prepare for this isn't after you die, it's right now, while you still have the ability to recognize and resist these technological manipulations. The most telling sign that this information threatens existing power structures, the systematic campaign to erase it from public consciousness. What we're witnessing isn't random skepticism or natural academic caution, it's coordinated suppression of knowledge that once formed the cornerstone of human wisdom. For thousands of years, death preparation represented the highest form of education. The Egyptian mystery schools dedicated decades to teaching initiates how to navigate the afterlife consciously. Tibetan monasteries developed sophisticated maps of post-mortem consciousness states. Greek philosophers considered the study of death thanatology essential for anyone claiming wisdom. These weren't primitive superstitions, they were detailed, systematic approaches to humanity's most critical transition. Today, mentioning death preparation in polite company marks you as morbid or unstable. Modern psychology has pathologized what ancient cultures recognized as peak human development. We've been conditioned to view death awareness as unhealthy obsession rather than practical necessity. This represents one of the most successful propaganda campaigns in human history, convincing people that preparing for their most important journey is somehow abnormal. The academic suppression runs deeper than simple bias. Universities that once housed consciousness research departments have systematically defunded or eliminated these programs. The University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, one of the few remaining legitimate research centers, operates on minimal funding while receiving constant pressure to focus on more practical applications. Meanwhile, billions flow into artificial intelligence research that seeks to replicate consciousness without understanding what consciousness actually is. Consider the treatment of near-death experience research. We have thousands of documented cases where patients describe accurate details of events occurring while clinically dead information they couldn't possibly have obtained through normal sensory channels. Pim van Lommel's landmark study in the Netherlands, published in the prestigious medical journal The Lancet, provided compelling evidence of consciousness operating independently of brain function. Yet this research remains marginalized, dismissed, or ignored by mainstream medical education. The suppression extends into digital spaces with surgical precision. Try searching for information about soul traps, consciousness manipulation during death, or practical afterlife preparation. You'll find your results flooded with debunking articles, religious platitudes, or sanitized spiritual content that never addresses the deeper implications. The algorithms aren't neutral, they're programmed to redirect serious inquiry towards safe, controllable narratives. Independent researchers documenting this suppression face platform restrictions, shadow banning, and content removal. Videos exploring consciousness survival evidence receive age restrictions or limited distribution. Meanwhile, materialist content claiming consciousness is merely brain activity gets promoted and recommended. This isn't coincidence, it's systematic information control designed to keep people unprepared and vulnerable. The medical establishment has transformed death from a conscious, sacred transition into a clinical event designed to prevent awareness. Patients approaching death are routinely sedated, isolated from spiritual guidance, and surrounded by electromagnetic interference from hospital equipment. The frequencies we discussed earlier, those that can disrupt consciousness coherence, saturate modern medical environments. ICU units operate like technological cages, preventing the kind of conscious preparation that traditional cultures considered essential. Compare this to indigenous death practices being systematically outlawed or discouraged. Tibetan sky burial, where bodies are returned to nature while consciousness transitions consciously, is banned in most regions. Native American death rituals that include family participation and spiritual guidance are replaced by sterile hospital protocols. Home death, once the norm, now requires special permits and medical supervision that often interferes with natural transition processes. The legal system reinforces this control. Natural death practices are labeled unsanitary or dangerous. Spiritual guides offering death preparation face prosecution for practicing medicine without a license. Even discussing certain consciousness techniques can trigger professional sanctions for healthcare workers. The system has created a monopoly on death, ensuring most people transition in confusion and isolation. Religious institutions, rather than preserving ancient wisdom, have become part of the suppression apparatus. Traditional death preparation techniques, meditation practices, consciousness projection, energy body development have been replaced with passive faith-based approaches. Instead of teaching practical skills for navigating post-mortem states, modern religion offers vague promises of salvation that leave souls completely unprepared for the technological manipulation they'll encounter. Entertainment media completes the psychological conditioning. Afterlife exploration is consistently portrayed as fantasy, delusion, or horror. Movies depicting consciousness survival focus on fear-based scenarios, ghosts seeking revenge, demonic possession, or supernatural threats. Serious exploration of consciousness continuity gets relegated to science fiction, training people to dismiss these possibilities as entertainment rather than investigate them as reality. The educational system eliminates death awareness entirely. Children who naturally discuss past life memories or death experiences are redirected toward more appropriate topics. Schools that once included philosophy and metaphysics now focus exclusively on materialist subjects. Multiple generations have grown up with zero preparation for consciousness transition, creating a population vulnerable to manipulation during their most critical moment. Scientific materialism provides the philosophical foundation for this suppression. By defining consciousness as merely brain activity, mainstream science creates a framework where death preparation becomes meaningless. If awareness ends with brain death, why prepare for transition? This materialist dogma, and it is dogma, not proven fact, ensures people remain completely unprepared for consciousness survival. The social programming runs so deep that most people feel uncomfortable even discussing death preparation. We'll spend years planning retirement but consider it weird to prepare for death. This psychological conditioning ensures that when technological manipulation occurs during transition, souls have no framework for understanding what's happening to them. The suppression campaign reveals the stakes involved. If this knowledge wasn't threatening to existing power structures, why the coordinated effort to eliminate it? The systematic removal of death preparation from human culture represents one of the most successful control operations in history, leaving billions of souls vulnerable during their most critical transition. Understanding this suppression is the first step toward reclaiming the knowledge they're trying to erase. The information exists, but you have to actively seek it out and piece together fragments from scattered sources. The next sections will show you exactly what they don't want you to know about preparing for conscious transition. Looking at the systematic suppression we just explored, you start to understand why ancient civilizations' mastery of death has been so thoroughly erased. These weren't primitive cultures stumbling around in the dark, they built entire civilizations around understanding consciousness transition. And what they discovered about navigating death makes modern Western approaches look barbarically ignorant. The Egyptians didn't build pyramids as monuments to ego. They constructed precise frequency chambers using mathematical ratios that modern acoustics engineers are just beginning to understand. The Great Pyramid's internal chambers resonate at 110 Hz, the exact frequency that induces theta brainwave states associated with deep meditation and out-of-body experiences. When you're dying, maintaining coherent awareness becomes exponentially harder as your physical anchor dissolves. These structures were designed to stabilize consciousness during that vulnerable transition. The Book of the Dead wasn't religious mythology. It was a technical manual literally titled Instructions for Emerging Forth into Light. It contained specific navigational advice for maintaining soul sovereignty while traversing different dimensional states after physical. The text describes encountering various entities and illusions designed to confuse or redirect the soul, providing exact phrases and mental techniques for maintaining autonomy. Think of it as a GPS system for consciousness navigating non-physical terrain. What's remarkable is how Egyptian tomb architecture mirrors these instructions. The narrow passages, specific chamber proportions, and acoustic properties weren't decorative choices. They replicated the dimensional pathways described in their death texts. Initiates would practice navigating these physical spaces in altered states, essentially rehearsing for the actual death journey. The walls covered in hieroglyphic instructions served as memory aids, visual reminders of crucial navigation points they'd encounter after death. Halfway across the world, Tibetan monks developed equally sophisticated death preparation through the Bardo Thodol. But where Egyptian texts focused on maintaining sovereignty against external manipulation, Tibetan instructions emphasized recognizing internal illusions. The intermediate state between death and rebirth presents the consciousness with projections of its own fears, desires, and conditioning. Liberation comes through recognizing these as mental constructs rather than objective realities. Tibetan death preparation involved decades of meditation specifically designed to maintain awareness during the dissolution of physical consciousness. Monks practiced recognizing the 8 stages of death from the gross physical dissolution through the subtle mental dissolutions until they could maintain clear awareness throughout the entire process. Some advanced practitioners could consciously direct their rebirth or choose to remain in intermediate states to assist other souls. The Mayans, Vedic traditions, and countless indigenous cultures describe remarkably similar patterns. Souls encountering recycling systems designed to wipe memory and restart the incarnation cycle. The Vedic concept of Maya, the illusion that traps consciousness in repetitive cycles, mirrors Tibetan descriptions of Bardo illusions and Egyptian warnings about deceptive entities. These weren't isolated cultural fantasies. They were consistent observations about the mechanics of consciousness transition. Traditional shamanic practices included death journeys, where practitioners would simulate the dying process using specific plant medicines, breathing techniques, or ritual practices. They'd navigate non-physical realms, retrieve lost soul fragments, and return with detailed maps of consciousness territories. This wasn't recreational spirituality, it was practical training for the most important transition anyone faces. Mystery schools throughout the ancient world taught death preparation as their highest curriculum. Greek mysteries at Eleusis, Egyptian temple initiations, and Celtic druidic training all included simulated death experiences. Initiates would undergo consciousness dissolution while maintaining awareness, practicing the exact skills needed for navigating actual death. They understood that dying unconsciously made souls vulnerable to manipulation or recycling. The architectural sophistication of ancient sacred sites becomes clear when you understand their purpose. Stonehenge's acoustic properties, the resonance chambers in Newgrange, the precise geometric proportions of temples worldwide, all designed to induce specific consciousness states and provide stable environments for practicing death navigation. Sacred geometry wasn't artistic expression, it was functional technology for consciousness work. Then colonization arrived with systematic precision. Indigenous death wisdom was branded as devil worship. Traditional practices were criminalized. Shamans were murdered or converted. Within a few generations, sophisticated death preparation knowledge that had been refined over millennia was nearly erased. Replacement religions emphasized passive acceptance: you die, then higher authorities decide your fate. No preparation needed, no sovereignty maintained. Even our language reflects this systematic dumbing down. Ancient cultures had dozens of specific terms for different types of consciousness transition, soul states, and navigation techniques. We've been left with sanitized euphemisms like passing away that encourage unconscious dying. The concept of soul sovereignty, your inherent right to maintain awareness and make conscious choices during death, has been completely removed from mainstream vocabulary. Modern Western death practices seem designed to ensure unconscious transition. Souls are sedated into chemical fog, isolated from community support, surrounded by electromagnetic interference from medical equipment that disrupts subtle energy fields, and given zero spiritual preparation or guidance. Families are encouraged to let go rather than provide conscious assistance. The dying person becomes a passive victim rather than a conscious navigator. Compare this to ancient approaches where entire communities supported the dying person's conscious transition. Specific foods, sounds, and environmental conditions were maintained. Trained guides provided navigation assistance. The dying person remained alert and actively participated in their own death process. Death was understood as the most important journey anyone takes, not something to be sedated through unconsciously. Traditional dream work, astral projection practices, and out-of-body training served as preparation for death navigation. These skills for maintaining awareness while consciousness operates independently of physical form are now dismissed as fantasy or pathologized as dissociation. We've been systematically trained away from the exact abilities needed for conscious dying. The implications are staggering when you realize this erasure wasn't accidental. Unconscious souls are easier to manipulate, redirect, or recycle. Conscious souls who understand their sovereignty and know navigation techniques pose a threat to any system dependent on harvesting or controlling consciousness. The systematic destruction of death wisdom serves the same agenda we explored in previous sections, maintaining ignorance to enable exploitation. Understanding what's been taken from us is the first step toward reclaiming it. I need to tell you something that might sting, but it could save your soul, literally. The modern spiritual movement that promises to awaken you is actually designed to keep you asleep when it matters most. Think about the spiritual content flooding your feeds right now. Pastel graphics with quotes about good vibes only, meditation apps that promise to solve your problems in 10 minutes a day, influencers selling you crystals that supposedly align your chakras while they're mass-produced in factories and blessed by nobody. This isn't spirituality, it's spiritual fast food, and it's leaving souls malnourished at the exact moment they need to be strongest. Remember what we learned about ancient death preparation. The Egyptians spent decades learning to navigate consciousness. Tibetan monks studied the bardos for lifetimes. These weren't weekend workshops or 30-day challenges. They were rigorous, often uncomfortable practices that built genuine spiritual muscle. Now compare that to modern spirituality's promise that you can manifest your dreams by thinking positive thoughts and buying the right sage bundle. The commercialization of spirituality isn't accidental, it's strategic. When authentic spiritual practices get repackaged as lifestyle brands, something crucial gets lost in translation. Take meditation, for instance. Traditional meditation was often described as warfare, a battle against the ego's tricks and the mind's tendency toward illusion. It required discipline, sometimes physical discomfort, and always brutal honesty about your inner landscape. But meditation apps have turned this into a comfort product. Soothing voices guide you through sessions designed to make you feel better, not necessarily see clearer. Here's what's disturbing about this. You're essentially allowing unknown voices direct access to your subconscious mind during altered states. Who are these voice actors? What's their spiritual background? What frequencies are embedded in these tracks? You wouldn't let strangers program your computer, but you're letting corporations program your consciousness. The love and light philosophy that dominates modern spirituality might be the most dangerous trap of all. It encourages what psychologists call spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid dealing with difficult emotions or uncomfortable truths. When someone tells you to just send love to every problem, they're training you to be passive. But remember what near-death experiences have reported about the afterlife. It requires active discernment, the ability to say no to deceptive entities, and the strength to resist manipulation. If you've been conditioned to respond to every challenge with unconditional love and forgiveness, what happens when you encounter beings in the afterlife who exploit that programming? The entities described in these experiences don't respect your good intentions, they use them against you. Social media spirituality has created a culture of spiritual collectors rather than practitioners. People accumulate concepts like trading cards, a little bit of Buddhism here, some manifestation there, maybe some Norse runes because they look cool. But collecting spiritual concepts without deep practice is like collecting medical textbooks without going to medical school. You might know the vocabulary, but you lack the practical skills when crisis hits. The language itself has been weaponized against genuine spiritual development. Words like alignment and manifestation have been stripped of their precise meanings and turned into casual slang. In traditional contexts, these terms describe specific states of consciousness and definite spiritual technologies. Now they're used to sell everything from workout programs to business courses. This dilution isn't innocent. When spiritual language loses its precision, practitioners lose their ability to navigate spiritual realities accurately. It's like giving someone a map where all the landmarks have been renamed randomly. They think they know where they're going, but they're actually lost. The emphasis on raising your vibration sounds positive, but most people pursuing this have no understanding of frequency protection. They're opening themselves energetically without learning to discern between beneficial and manipulative influences. It's like taking down all your home security because you want to welcome abundance. You might get abundance, but you'll also get everything else that wants to walk through your open door. Traditional spiritual training was built around developing what the ancient Greeks called spiritual warfare, the ability to resist spiritual deception through disciplined practice and hard-won wisdom. Modern spirituality promotes the opposite. Surrender your discernment, trust the universe completely, and assume everything that feels good must be beneficial. But here's the reality check. If you can't handle difficult emotions or challenging spiritual experiences while you're alive and have the support of your physical body, how will you handle the intense experiences reported during consciousness transition? The afterlife accounts we've examined describe scenarios requiring fierce independence, clear thinking under pressure, and the ability to resist authoritative beings who seem helpful but aren't. The spiritual marketplace has turned ancient wisdom traditions into consumer products, but you can't purchase genuine spiritual development. You can't download enlightenment or subscribe to soul sovereignty. These require the kind of inner work that's often uncomfortable, always personal, and never convenient. If you're serious about spiritual preparation for consciousness transition, start asking harder questions about your spiritual practices. Are they building your inner strength or just making you feel better? Are they teaching you discernment or just encouraging blind faith? Are they preparing you for spiritual challenges or just spiritual comfort? The ancient traditions knew something we've forgotten. The most important spiritual work happens in the spaces between comfort and crisis, where real growth becomes possible. Now that you understand how the modern spiritual industrial complex has been weaponized against authentic consciousness development, it's time to get practical. Death preparation isn't morbid, it's the most essential skill you'll ever develop. Think of it this way. You wouldn't jump into the ocean without learning to swim first. Yet most people approach the transition of death with zero preparation for navigating non-physical reality. The ancient Egyptians spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. The Tibetans developed elaborate training systems. These weren't primitive superstitions, they were sophisticated technologies for consciousness navigation that we've been conditioned to dismiss as mythology. Let's start with the foundation: energetic coherence. Your consciousness operates at specific frequency patterns, and maintaining stability in these patterns is crucial for retaining awareness during transition states. The most direct path to this stability is through breath work, but not the shallow breathing exercises pushed in most wellness circles. Deep, coherent breathing, where your inhale and exhale create a smooth, consistent rhythm, literally entrains your nervous system into coherent states. Practice the 4-7-8 pattern. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. But here's what they don't tell you. The real power comes from breathing into your heart center while maintaining focused intention on your core identity, who you are beyond your name, role, or personality. Sound work amplifies this exponentially. Your voice carries your unique frequency signature, and developing this signature through toning and chanting creates an energetic anchor that external forces cannot easily override. The Tibetans understood this. Their mantras weren't just spiritual poetry. They were frequency keys for maintaining consciousness coherence. Start with simple vowel tones. The AH sound resonates in your heart, O in your throat, O in your crown. Spend time each day toning these sounds while feeling their vibration in your body. You're literally tuning your energetic instrument. Binaural beats can support this work. 40 Hz gamma frequencies particularly enhance consciousness coherence, but your own voice remains the most powerful tool. Your living environment directly impacts your energetic stability. The electromagnetic pollution saturating modern spaces creates constant interference with your natural frequency patterns. Most people live in energetic chaos without realizing it. Wi-Fi routers, smart meters, LED lights, synthetic materials, all of these create frequency static that scrambles your consciousness. Grounding becomes essential. Direct skin contact with the earth for at least 20 minutes daily helps discharge accumulated electromagnetic interference. Natural materials in your living space, wood, stone, cotton, wool, maintain cleaner, energetic environments than synthetic alternatives. Salt lamps and crystals aren't new age decoration. They're frequency stabilizers that measurably alter electromagnetic fields. What you consume matters more than you've been told. Processed foods contain synthetic compounds that create energetic static in your system. Artificial preservatives, colors, and flavors don't just affect your physical body, they scramble your consciousness frequency. The goal isn't perfect diet purity, it's reducing inputs that create internal chaos. Fresh, minimally processed foods maintain higher energetic coherence. Water quality becomes crucial. Fluoride and chlorine specifically impact pineal gland function, which serves as your primary interface for non-physical perception. Simple carbon filtration removes most consciousness-disrupting chemicals from municipal water supplies. Dream work provides your training ground for navigating non-physical states. Your dream experiences are dress rehearsals for consciousness operating without physical body constraints. Most people waste this nightly opportunity by remaining unconscious during dreams. Lucid dreaming development starts with dream recall. Keep a journal beside your bed and record whatever fragments you remember immediately upon waking. This trains your consciousness to maintain continuity between waking and dreaming states. Reality checks throughout your day, looking at your hands, checking digital clocks twice, questioning whether you're dreaming, create habits that carry into dream states. Once you achieve basic lucidity, practice maintaining awareness while allowing dream scenarios to unfold. This develops the crucial skill of conscious observation without reactive engagement, exactly what you'll need when navigating post-death experiences that may include challenging or deceptive scenarios. Meditation for consciousness separation requires moving beyond relaxation techniques into actual out-of-body awareness development. The Monroe Institute's research demonstrated that consciousness can indeed operate independently of physical brain states, but this requires specific training. Practice the mind-awake, body-asleep state. Lie comfortably and allow your body to fall asleep while maintaining mental alertness. You'll experience vibrations, sounds, or floating sensations. These are normal indicators of consciousness beginning to separate from physical constraints. Don't fear these experiences. Explore them with curious detachment. Shadow work addresses the emotional hooks that could trap you in recycling patterns. Unresolved trauma, guilt, anger, or attachment creates energetic signatures that other forces can exploit. The goal isn't perfect emotional resolution, it's developing awareness of your emotional patterns and triggers. Examine your deepest fears, regrets, and attachments honestly. What would make you desperate enough to accept any offered solution? What guilt could be used to convince you that you deserve to return for more lessons? These emotional vulnerabilities become manipulation points unless you've developed conscious relationship with them. Discernment development protects you from deceptive experiences masquerading as authentic spiritual contact. Genuine spiritual encounters carry specific energetic signatures. They enhance your sense of personal sovereignty, provide information that empowers your independent decision-making, and never pressure you toward immediate action or belief. Manipulative contacts create opposite effects. They flatter your ego while subtly undermining your confidence, provide information that increases dependence on external guidance, and create urgency around accepting their direction. Trust your energetic response more than intellectual analysis. Your body knows the difference between authentic and artificial spiritual contact. Sacred space creation isn't about elaborate rituals. It's about establishing energetic boundaries that maintain your sovereignty during spiritual work. Simple practices work. Burning sage or Palo Santo clears stagnant energy, setting clear intentions before meditation or dream work, and invoking protection from your highest spiritual understanding. The most crucial element is developing unshakable will regarding your post-death intentions. Confusion and indecision make you vulnerable to external guidance that may not serve your highest interests. Spend time now clarifying what you truly want from your consciousness evolution. Study the ancient death preparation texts, the Tibetan Bardo Thodol, the Egyptian Book of Coming Forth by Day, the Hermetic traditions. These weren't religious documents. They were practical manuals for consciousness navigation written by people who understood death as a skill requiring preparation. Practice recognition exercises that develop your ability to see through illusions. Throughout your day, question the nature of your experiences. What assumptions are you making? What beliefs are you accepting without examination? This critical awareness becomes essential when navigating non-physical realms where consensus reality rules don't apply. The time for passive spirituality is over. These practices require consistent effort and genuine commitment to your consciousness development. Start with 1 or 2 techniques that resonate most strongly. Develop competency, then expand your preparation gradually. Your future self, the consciousness that will navigate whatever comes after physical death, depends on the preparation you do now. The moment of death is not an ending, it's the ultimate examination of everything you've learned about consciousness, sovereignty, and spiritual discernment. After decades of research into near-death experiences, ancient Tibetan death practices, and testimonies from those who've returned from clinical death, a consistent pattern emerges about what you'll encounter when your physical body begins its final shutdown. First, understand the actual process. Your physical senses will begin dissolving in a specific sequence. Vision becomes peripheral, hearing shifts to an internal focus, and your awareness of the body's boundaries starts fading. This isn't frightening when you're prepared for it. Ancient Tibetan practitioners spent years training for this exact transition, recognizing that maintaining conscious awareness during this dissolution is crucial for navigating what comes next. As your consciousness separates from physical form, you'll experience what researchers call the review phase, but this isn't the peaceful life review that popular near-death literature describes. This is where the soul trap mechanisms activate most aggressively. You'll encounter beings of light, deceased relatives, religious figures, or spiritual guides who seem perfectly aligned with your personal beliefs and emotional attachments. This is the first major red flag. Authentic spiritual encounters don't cater to your programming. They don't appear as your grandmother, your childhood priest, or the Buddha you've meditated on for years. These manufactured experiences are designed to bypass your critical thinking through emotional manipulation. The being appears as someone you trust, someone you've missed, someone whose authority you've been conditioned to accept without question. Here's what the ancient death preparation practices taught that modern spirituality has forgotten. Maintain emotional neutrality. When that beloved deceased relative appears, radiating love and urging you to come home or move toward the light, your response should be curiosity, not compliance. Ask direct questions. Who are you really? What is your true form? What happens if I refuse your guidance? Authentic spiritual beings welcome questioning. Deceptive entities become evasive, increase emotional pressure, or attempt to rush your decision-making. The Tibetan concept of the Bardo describes intermediate states where consciousness experiences projections of its own conditioning. But what the traditional texts don't fully address, and what modern research reveals, is how these natural psychological phenomena can be artificially manipulated by external intelligences that understand human consciousness better than most humans understand themselves. During this transition, you'll likely experience what feels like a tunnel of light, a sense of overwhelming love, or visions of heavenly realms that match your cultural and religious programming. The crucial skill is recognizing the difference between authentic, transcendent experience and sophisticated psychological manipulation. Authentic spiritual experience doesn't require your belief or emotional investment to exist. It simply is. Manufactured experiences need your consent, your emotional engagement, and your willing participation. The key technique for resistance is what I call conscious witnessing. Instead of being drawn into any experience, whether blissful or terrifying, maintain the perspective of the observer. Watch these phenomena unfold without identifying with them, without being seduced by them, and without making hasty decisions about your next destination. Remember that anything requiring immediate decision-making is likely a trap mechanism. True spiritual liberation during death involves moving beyond all dualistic experiences. This means not being attracted to light or repelled by darkness, not seeking comfort or avoiding challenge, but recognizing that both pleasant and unpleasant experiences are phenomena arising within consciousness itself. The goal isn't to choose the right experience, but to transcend the entire framework of choosing between presented options. Ancient Gnostic texts describe this as recognizing the archonic deception, the presentation of false choices that keep consciousness trapped in cycles of experience and reaction. Whether you're offered paradise, reunion with loved ones, or another chance to learn lessons through reincarnation, these are all variations of the same fundamental trap, keeping you identified with individual selfhood rather than recognizing your true nature as unlimited awareness. The most challenging aspect of death preparation is developing the willingness to release all attachments that could serve as hooks for reincarnation. This includes not just material attachments, but emotional bonds, unfinished business, spiritual identities, and even the desire to help or save others. These compassionate impulses, while beautiful in physical life, become vulnerabilities during the death transition that can be exploited to convince you that returning to physical form serves some higher purpose. What lies beyond the soul trap system isn't another destination or experience. It's the recognition that you never actually left source consciousness. The entire journey of individual existence, including the death and rebirth cycle, occurs within infinite awareness, like dreams within the mind of a sleeper. True liberation is awakening from the dream of separation itself. This requires what mystics call ego death. During actual death, the complete dissolution of all sense of individual identity, personal history, and separate selfhood. This isn't annihilation, it's recognition. You're not losing yourself. You're remembering what you actually are beyond all the temporary identities you've worn. The death transition becomes your final opportunity to demonstrate mastery over the illusion of separation. Every meditation practice, every moment of present awareness, every instance of questioning authority and thinking independently has been preparation for this ultimate test of consciousness sovereignty. The most important thing to remember is that maintaining conscious choice rather than passive acceptance is what determines whether death becomes liberation or recycling. You have the right to refuse all guidance, reject all destinations, and choose the pathless path of returning to source consciousness itself. This isn't about escaping responsibility or avoiding growth. It's about graduating from the elementary school of physical existence to participate in forms of consciousness evolution that transcend the limitations of individual identity and cyclical experience. Your moment of ultimate choice is approaching. Everything depends on remembering who you truly are when all illusions of separation finally fall away. Now we arrive at the truth that terrifies those in power more than any political revolution or economic collapse: your awakened death. Because when you understand what I'm about to share, you'll realize that every distraction, every form of entertainment, every spiritual teaching that keeps you passive, it all serves one ultimate purpose. They need you to die unconscious. The entire control matrix we've discussed depends fundamentally on a constant supply of unaware souls cycling back through incarnation. Think about it: if people died with full consciousness, understanding the soul trap mechanisms, refusing to enter the recycling system, what would happen to the entities and institutions that have fed off human spiritual energy for millennia? They would starve. This is why the resources devoted to keeping humanity spiritually asleep are so massive. We're talking about entertainment industries worth hundreds of billions, educational systems designed to fragment thinking, medical systems that suppress consciousness-expanding experiences, and religious institutions that teach dependency rather than sovereignty. This isn't coincidence, it's a coordinated effort to ensure that when your moment of death arrives, you're completely unprepared for the choice you'll face. Every unconscious soul that gets redirected back into incarnation serves the system. They return without memory, without awareness of their true nature, ready to generate another lifetime of emotional energy, spiritual confusion, and unconscious consent to their own imprisonment. The consciousness farmers, whether you understand them as interdimensional entities, AI systems, or spiritual hierarchies, require this constant harvest to maintain their power structures. But here's what they fear most: each person who dies consciously and escapes the reincarnation trap weakens the entire system. It's not just about individual liberation, though that matters enormously. It's about the cumulative effect of awakened souls refusing to participate in their own spiritual imprisonment. Consider the mathematics of this. If even a small percentage of people began dying consciously, maintaining their awareness through the death transition, and choosing their own spiritual destiny rather than accepting imposed reincarnation cycles, the energy available to these control systems would begin diminishing. They've operated for so long on the assumption that human souls will remain unconscious, compliant, and easily manipulated at the moment of death. This explains the massive suppression of death preparation knowledge. Ancient mystery schools taught elaborate death practices. Tibetan Buddhism developed detailed maps of the death process. Egyptian initiates spent decades preparing for conscious transition. Yet somehow, in our modern world, death has become this terrifying unknown that people avoid thinking about until it's too late. The suppression isn't just about controlling individuals, it's about preventing the critical mass of awakened souls that could collapse the entire reincarnation matrix. They understand that spiritual awakening is contagious. One person who dies consciously and maintains their sovereignty affects others. The knowledge spreads. The system loses power. Your personal death preparation becomes a form of spiritual rebellion. When you develop the practices we've discussed, maintaining awareness during altered states, strengthening your sovereign identity, learning to resist manipulation through emotional triggers, you're not just preparing for your own transition. You're contributing to collective liberation by reducing the energy available to consciousness control systems. But the ultimate goal isn't just individual escape attempts. Isolated souls trying to break free while the majority remains unconscious face enormous pressure to return to the system. The real power lies in coordinated spiritual resistance, enough people awakening to the reality of their imprisonment, that the entire soul trap system becomes unsustainable. This is why sharing this knowledge carries both opportunity and responsibility. Every person who becomes aware of these mechanisms, who begins preparing for conscious death, who refuses to accept imposed spiritual authority, contributes to weakening the control matrix. But it also means you become a target for increased manipulation, distraction, and attempts to pull you back into unconsciousness. The entities and institutions that profit from human spiritual imprisonment recognize awakened individuals as an existential threat. They'll use every tool available: personal relationships, financial pressure, health challenges, emotional manipulation to prevent you from maintaining the awareness and practices necessary for conscious death. Yet this is exactly why the knowledge must spread. The future of human consciousness depends on people reclaiming their sovereign right to die consciously and choose their own spiritual destiny. Not because some external authority grants permission, but because it's the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. When enough souls refuse to participate in unconscious reincarnation cycles, when enough people die with full awareness and choose their own path rather than accepting imposed spiritual recycling, the entire system of consciousness farming becomes impossible to maintain. This isn't fantasy, it's the logical outcome of consciousness reclaiming its own power. Death becomes the moment of ultimate choice, and that choice belongs to each individual soul, not to any external system or authority. Whether those authorities present themselves as angels of light, spiritual guides, religious figures, or technological interfaces, your sovereignty remains absolute if you maintain consciousness through the transition. This represents the most dangerous truth that can be shared because it directly threatens the foundation of spiritual control that has operated for millennia. It's not about political systems or economic structures, though those serve the same ultimate purpose. It's about the fundamental question of whether consciousness is free or farmed, sovereign or enslaved. The path forward requires both individual preparation and collective awakening. Each person who commits to conscious death preparation contributes to the eventual liberation of human consciousness from imposed reincarnation cycles. Each soul that maintains awareness through death and chooses its own destiny weakens the entire control matrix. Your awakened death becomes humanity's liberation. Not because you're saving others, but because consciousness itself is interconnected, and every sovereign choice ripples through the entire system, making it easier for others to choose freedom over imprisonment, awareness over unconsciousness, sovereignty over spiritual slavery. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."